All right. So I just was saying, I thank you for you guys who don't know, Nancy and I met when I was campaigning and we quickly became good friends, and we've stayed friends throughout my term now as freeholder, and we connect on so many other issues, but this issue in particular, the death of George Floyd, Nancy reached out and asked if I would consider having the conversation, and I absolutely want to continue the conversation. I think it's a great dialogue that we have to have, and I think this is the beginning to figuring out what needs to be done to end systemic racism. But what I thought would be interesting, I do have a son. He's my only child. He's 21 years old. And aside from his father, he's the most important Black man in my life. And I thought it would be interesting to hear his take on how he feels about everything that's going on, right? And he and I started having we have the conversation all the time, but I'm going to finish the conversation that he and I started having with him now. So everyone, welcome my son, Justin. So come on over here.
Hi, Justin. Justin, everybody's muted, so don't think they're being rude.
Yeah. So this is my son, Justin. He's 21 years old. And he and I started having a conversation. And I said to him, at what age did you have to worry about leaving home because how did I put it? Leaving home while Black, or leaving home? Just being Black and leaving out the house. At what age did he truly worry about being Black and leaving out the house? Although we've had the conversation. So his response was?
At about the age maybe of about 13.
13 years old, guys. 13. He felt that he needed to be more aware because of his skin color. That is, and I always knew it, but when I hear him talk about it now as an adult, right? 13 years old, having to worry about your skin color, and he's in the 8th grade. You're just going to school. So 13-year-old white boys and Asian boys aren't worrying about this.
Right.
So we have the conversation because it's been a part of our fabric. So how many adult males in your life had to give you the talk about what happens when you get pulled over? How many adult males in your immediate life?
In my immediate life?
Yeah.
None really, just dad.
So of course his father gave him the talk, probably Uncle John on some level. Nobody?
No, not really Uncle John. More so, at that point in time, it would have came from coaches.
Yep.
More so.
He played football.
Coaches,
He played football, middle school through high school.
And also my cousin Corey Walker.
His cousin Corey Walker, who was a couple of years older than him, had to started having. And how old were you when they started that conversation with you?
That was maybe freshman, sophomore year, so maybe
14, 15 years old. 15. So at 13, he's worrying about his skin color when he leaves. At 14, 15, he's already getting the talk, and he doesn't have a permit and or driver's license. He's already getting the talk about what to do if you are pulled over. So to me, that's astounding. So as you can see, it was a part of his young teenage years and now his young adult life. So how do you feel now when you're out driving your car? If you were to pass a cop, get pulled over?
Well, honestly,
Just, I can't see you.
Driving now, it is a little bit more, I would say scary, because honestly, it's no other way that you can really put it. Driving in your car just like on a normal day. If a police officer gets behind you, instantly my heart starts to beat. Because I don't know which way this can go. You know what I mean? Right. So it's always it's frightening. It's a very nerve-wracking experience when it shouldn't be, and being, naturally, as you drive, you will get pulled over here and there. And I have been pulled over, a couple of times, all of which times, I was completely respectful and cooperative with the officers. And that also was returned, you know what I mean? That respect and everything. But, it's you never can tell who's going to be that one, you know what I mean? That one cop that may, the amount of respect that you give him and, the manners that you treat him with still won't be enough, So it's always scary, no matter, you know what I mean? No matter if a white or black cop gets out the car, it's always scary, and just like, watching the cop walk up to the window, you know what I mean, with his hand already on his gun, it's like, why? You know what I mean? All my windows are down, the car, I don't even keep my car on during a traffic stop because I was told by a neighbor who's a correction officer, who's also person of color, that even told me even a cop pulled him over and gave him a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? He was in full uniform. He had his badge on. He's a correction officer in Burlington County in the Burlington jail. And a cop pulled him over, gave him a hard time. It took all of 30 minutes for the cop to even realize that he was also a member of law enforcement. You know what I mean? He just completely, disregarded the fact that he was in a full black and blue uniform, like his comrade that was pulling him over. You know what I mean? So it's really no telling. You know what I mean? It's really scary. Really scary film.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that I said on Sunday when I spoke at the protest, I literally worry every time he leaves the house. And listen, some of the times when he leaves the house, he's leaving to run errands for me. Yeah. And I always, it does not matter if it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I worry obviously more at night if he's just going to hang out with his friends. His friends are all close in proximity. Nobody's really far, but even if it's a 10-minute ride or a 20-minute ride, I worry, and thankfully he's respectful enough to check in with me and say, Mom, good, or Mom, thankfully I don't have to stress out about him just checking in, because he'll do that just to ease my worry. But I think it's just embedded in us and how we connect as mother and son. So he doesn't want me to worry. Yeah. But I should not have to worry about my son going on a 3-minute drive to his friend's house, because like I said, all his friends live in close proximity. He's an adult now. So sometimes they hang out late. I can't say anything, but I shouldn't have to have that added worry because of his skin color. And I think that this conversation is the beginning, but I don't think it's nowhere near coming to what we can and should be doing. Yeah. We had a freeholder meeting today, and we had someone call in, and she was a resident from Chesterfield, and she was irate that we did not have a resolution talking about Black Lives Matter. So during my freeholder comments, my freeholder comment was, well, what is good is the resolution going to do? Right. We as a freeholder board are not responsible for solving this problem. Should we continue the conversation and make sure the conversation is continued? Absolutely. But just because we put a resolution on our agenda, what is that going to do now? I don't want to do something that's haphazard. Right. It's not there. We have to continue the conversation to figure out what's next. Putting a resolution on our agenda is not what's next. I don't think that, I think it would have done all of us, it would have been a slap in the face, in my opinion, as a Black person. I felt like it would have been a slap in the face, because what are you trying to say? Are you trying to placate me? Yeah. Are you trying to placate me? Because that's how I would have felt. Yeah. I'm not speaking for all Black people. I'm only speaking for myself. So, I want us to have this dialogue, because as I have the conversations with my son, and as he goes to have his friend is on his way over here, and they're going to go and do whatever they're going to do, I still want to make sure that they are treated fairly. I've always told them, you still got to do what's right. Like, you can't, try to outrun the police or anything like that. If you ever get stopped, you still have to be respectful and so forth and so on. But if we don't continue this conversation and come up with a plan, we are going to be right where we are. Yeah. I don't think that we're going to see change, because we still see the people, like the New Jersey correction officer today, and we saw the teenagers last week, impersonating the George Floyd murder. We still see that, and because it's embedded in their fabric, that's hard to unwind. That's hard to unwoven, even, if you will. Right. So there's certain things that's embedded in my fabric as a person. Yeah. But if I had that level of hatred in me for all of my life, even if I was only 13, 14, or 15, it's hard to undo it, right? Yeah. And even if we take it from a different perspective, if you take it from a perspective of being a professional and what you consider when you are considered to be an expert, right? So I read The Story of Success by Malcolm Gladwell, and in his book, he talks about how long you take to become an expert. Okay, my son said he's leaving now. Thank you, Jess.
Bye-bye. It was nice meeting you.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for participating. We appreciate it.
In his book, he talks about how long it takes you to become an expert. So it's 10,000 hours or 7 years, whichever happens first, right? So just imagine if I was taught to be a racist from the age of 1. So by the time I get to be 7 or 8, I'm an expert at being a racist. Yeah. So just imagine now you impact that with years of growing up. So 7, 13, 21, 35. Like you are still, it's in your fabric. So it's hard to undo. Yeah. So, and that's the way I related. When I read that book, and I was even talking about my son because my son's a plumber. So I said to him, so he's been a plumber now for about 1.5 years. And I was like, oh, 6 more years, you'll be an expert because of the book I read, right? He was like, really, Mom? But anyway, yeah, 6 more years, you'll be an expert. So even as I take that, and because I needed to quantify when I'm having these conversations, it takes 7 years to become an expert at something, or 10,000 hours, whichever happens first. So if you're taught that at such a young age, it's hard to get that out of you. Yeah. And that's the problem that I think so I think it sits much deeper than what we are seeing, but that is a huge problem for us as a society. So I think that is the disconnect and that's one of the reasons why we still have these protests, because Black people know that, but white people don't understand that. So that's why I thought it was important for me to quantify it. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think we're just learning this now. A lot of white people just didn't, even if we sort of knew, we didn't really make the connection. Mm-hmm. And I think it's still going to take a long time for some people to make that connection.
Yeah. And I don't protest to have all the answers, or I can't speak for all Black people. I can only speak from my experiences, and obviously from the conversations that I have with my son, and being the mother of a Black son, and knowing what the worry is. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, and when we lost Trayvon Martin, I thought I was losing my mind. I tried to get rid of all of his hooded sweatshirts. I bet. You know, and it sounds silly, but I really was like, please don't wear a hooded sweatshirt. I and so many of my friends who have Black boys, I thought we were like, what? And we just, the hurt and just the lack of understanding as to how this could happen, it stung us. And I literally went in his room and tried to get rid of all of his hooded sweatshirts. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but no, really I just didn't want my son to be a statistic. And I thought to myself, this is what most men wear, not just Black men. I see white men in hooded sweatshirts and jeans and Timberlands all the time, especially if you're from this part of the country. Yeah. I see a lot of men, and that's almost considered a uniform for running errands. Yeah. It's like so many people have that. So why is this a problem? Yeah. So it's just, it stings. It really does. It stings. And for those of you who heard me on Sunday, I was crying because I just cannot believe the lack of respect for another human being because they have a different skin color. Yeah. And I go through it all the time. I experienced racism when I was on the campaign trail. I experienced it a lot when I got elected. You know, and unfortunately, I'm an expert at dealing with it. So it doesn't bother me as much, but I like most of my friends, we can spot a racist a mile away. And we know when to go, where to go, when to stay away from them, how to move forward. I'm sure some of the other Black women on the call knows exactly what I'm talking about. We can spot a racist a mile away. Yeah. So it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
Do you want me to open this up to a conversation, or?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Does anyone have any questions or comments, or does anybody want to say anything? Can you raise your hand for me? Wanda?
Still learning how to use Zoom.
There you are. Well, I'm handling the muting and the unmuting.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Hello. I came in on the tail end of Felicia's first talking before she was talking formally for the Zoom. And I didn't hear all, but I heard Felicia talking about, because of her year that she came into this world, this is a newer experience. I keep thinking that I'm young, and I keep looking at a calendar and realizing, how do these years accumulate? So we've been through these years before. Mm-hmm. To say, not for this length of time with demonstrations straight through. This is brand new.
Right. Yeah, indeed.
I'm just trying to tie a few things together quickly. I've been grieving lately because I lost the elder in my family member.
Oh, sorry.
To COVID-19.
Mm-hmm. Sorry for you.
And I deeply emotionally am faulting that person down in Washington for his failures. I deeply was already faulting for his embedded lack of care and humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And in the loss of this recent family member and a few others that I know who died of COVID-19 also, I was feeling that absence just through my pores of people no longer in my life and my family life and the dynamics. I call it the mobile, how a mobile hangs together. If you move one part off of a mobile, it no longer hangs properly. Everything goes off kilter, and each death throws something off kilter, and the family dynamics change. And within my family, I was thinking about my family members who worked on a national scale in civil rights. My family member who literally gave his life in 1950 for the cause. And before everything hit the fan the past 2 weeks, and we were already building up with the films that were coming up, I was angry. I was resentful. I was resentful that my family members have given their blood, sweat, and tears, literally, for generations, for decades. And for what? Right. We people of color have benefited incrementally with every generation moving forward. But because I was feeling the family loss and I was feeling the damage that occurs within families, people lost their grandfather, their cousin, their uncle, their brother, depending on what the relationship is, and then how that then has a domino effect on all that does or does not unfold.
Mm-hmm.
I very much was emotional already.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I need to pause just for a second. I need to pause.
Mm-hmm.
I was angry at the feeling, and as I reacted to in that email that I responded to immediately, I was livid, and I wasn't going to hold back on my emotional response. What do you mean co-opting this narrative again? What do you mean interjecting, oh, but I, or changing the narrative of, but of course Black Lives Matters, but of course, but all white lives matter. And let's just ignore your point and always have to take it back. No one said all lives don't matter. That has never been the case. And bring it back to my family members' fight, literal fight to the death. All the time that there's been information available. There's a television show that's on in my background right now that I was watching before I turned this on. My son turned me on to the other day. I tried to Google it by its title. It's called Burn Mother Earth. That says, we're sorry, we don't answer to that language. But when I put it in another way, it came up. And it's a discussion of the Watts riots in Los Angeles in years past and the dynamics and all of the nonsense that goes on. But my point is, we've had movies, we've had discussions, we've had literature, we've had opportunities. And it's been for people that have not really fully embraced or been able to recognize the full blessing of just being able to breathe while walking.
Yeah.
And to take it for granted and not have to focus and to be able to say, oh, but Felicia, but let me tell you about my experience. Well, I did this and I did that. I would like to just have maybe a giant drive-in and run 24/7 for maybe 6 months while the weather's nice. All of our historical documents that have already been shown, all of our movies that have already been shown, all of our discussions that have already been shown, all of our roundtables, just go. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. But on a serious note, a lot of the younger people that I know and family and friends have been communicating in the past week about their own particular corporate businesses that they're now involved in because of the benefit of how we have been able to progress little bit by little bit with each generation. And each of them, though, is getting called upon to help us establish our corporate narrative. What are we going to say? What proclamation are we going to put out? Just like Felicia, put something out, from your office. And they're all saying the same thing. I thought I was thinking singular. They're all saying the same thing. We're not trying to put out a proclamation. We don't know. We're exhausted ourselves right this moment. People don't seem to recognize how psychically and emotionally traumatized we are because we didn't even know ourselves. Right. How deeply this is all affecting us until it is. And what these younger people are saying to me is that we're formulating maybe a notion. We're not trying to be the go-to people, as cliche has said in the past, the darky who solves all the problems. What's the phrase? The go-to Negro. who gives all the wisdom and gives all the answers. And that's been the historical narrative since Brer Rabbit and Song of the South and the old-fashioned movies. You'd go to the happy Negro, and the happy Negro would make everybody happy and tell all the good answers. They don't want to do that. None of us wants to do that. None of us wants to be that. We want to
I get it.
full participants as everyone else, but we want not to have people just sit back again and complacently or easily fall back to not or hearing what's already been said for generations and decades. So part of what I'm thinking is I would love to ask permission of some of those that I've already spoken to. Could I share? Someone did a PowerPoint and some slides were excellent. And I'd like to ask her, could I share some of these slides? Could we combine them with something that somebody else has seen someone else doing, someone else that comes up with a notion? On a national level, we have Cory Booker and others who are trying to establish some sort of notions, ideas on a legislative sense, on a practical sense, you know, think globally, but act locally also.
Right.
And we need a compilation of good ideas for our nation. And they're not going to apply across the board in every town or every state, because every place has its own nuances, has its own particularities, but we can pick and choose what makes sense.
I would love to give someone else a chance to.
I'm sorry, I'm finished. That was it.
No, I appreciate it. I want to bring it back, but maybe a different conversation. You know, I'd like to keep these going. Does anyone else have anything? Any questions, any comments? Nicole? Trying to unmute, there you go.
Yep, I'm good. So I just want to thank Felicia for being so honest with us and so human. And, you know, hearing from your son is so moving. So,
yeah,
you know, thank you for that. Also, I just kind of want to put out there as another elected official and as a white elected official, I'm so grateful for all of you speaking up, right? And we're not so hot at listening. This is not really what elected officials do, or well, I shouldn't say that, but you know, give us a microphone and we all go. But I'm really grateful for this, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to have these reminders to be quiet and listen and understand this differently. So that's all I want to say is thanks, and you know, particularly to Felicia for coming out as not just an elected official, but as a mother and as a human being. I think it's really valuable.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm unmuted. Okay. Thank you, Felicia, for coming out and speaking out. I am a mother and a grandmother of a son and a grandson, and it keeps me on my knees whenever they're not in contact. So I understand that fear as a mother, as a Black mother. It is, it's real. It's very, very real.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing that out. I had questions about how do you see Burlington County dealing with policing reformation? Do you think that Burlington County needs to reform its police? I know that freeholders basically deal with the sheriff department, not necessarily the state or the local policing, but have the freeholders thought about a way or a need to reform policing in our county?
So that's a great question. So yeah, just today alone, someone reached out to me a couple of days ago asking about police reform at the local level. So let me just, let me just say this, as you know, the Freeholder Board, we don't have any jurisdiction over the local police departments.
Right.
We have a partnership with Burlington County Prosecutor, right? So our Burlington County Prosecutor is Scott Kafina. He's appointed by the governor, and we have a relationship with him. And I know since I've been elected, he has done a a lot of community outreach regarding community policing, how to connect with people of color when they are policing them, understanding the importance of the fact that some people could be dealing with mental illness when they're being pulled over. So he started he started that program at ECHAM, I believe it started. So how I see Burlington County, to answer your question, I see us having more difficult conversations, but I would like to say that I think we're off in the right direction because of the partnership that we have with the Burlington County Prosecutor's Office, and because all of the local police chiefs report up to him. He has a good sense of, I don't know how I want to say it, but he has a good sense of connecting. He has a good sense of connecting with people of color. Obviously, he's not a person of color, but he has a good sense of connecting. And I do believe it's because he's in the position that he's in. It may have a lot to do with the town that he lives in as well. But because he has that good sense of connection, he doesn't shy away from the difficult conversations that we need to have. He doesn't shy away from the statistics, knowing that there's more African-American men in jail than white men. On lesser charges than white men, but serving more time than white men. He doesn't shy away from those conversations. And I know for a fact that he's had several conversations with the NAACP on how to improve community policing. So I think this unfortunate death of Mr. George Floyd will just force us to bring those conversations to light, because he put out a statement immediately. The prosecutor's office put out a statement immediately after it happened. And I know that he has regular conversations. So what I would like to see the county do is almost engage ourselves or ingest ourselves more in those conversations.
Okay.
So I think that would be a huge start, Ida. I think that is where we start.
Right.
With improving, because listen, the truth is Burlington County is a very racist county, right? And the Black people on this call know that. I've known that since I've lived here. I saw it when I was campaigning. I saw it when I wasn't campaigning. So Burlington County is a very racist county, but that doesn't mean that we aren't doing things to improve. So as a freeholder, what I would like to do, and I will have a conversation with the prosecutor. We spoke briefly today. I would like to ingest the county more in those conversations that he's having with the local municipalities and their police departments, so we can at least be on the same accord. And we are familiar with how they're addressing. My son gave an example when he was in high school. Willingboro Police Department, I think he was in the 10th or the 11th grade. Willingboro Police Department got rid of a lot of Black officers, and they brought in a lot of white officers. They brought those white officers to the high school, and they walked those white officers around while the students were in class. They were in gym class in the cafeteria. No official introduction, no official reason why. So I asked him, well, what did you take from that experience? He said, I took from that experience that those white men, forget about that they were cops, those white men were saying, let me get a good look at your face, because you're going to be the one I'm going to be locking up in a year or two. That's what my son interpreted from a non-verbal conversation with those white police officers coming into Willingboro High School when he was in 10th, 11th grade. So because he interpreted that from their body language, I can only assume, because there was no verbal conversation, that is problematic. So it's those type of experiences that I would like to share with the Burlington County Prosecutor's Office and say, this is what we have to change. Because my son, as a 15-year-old Black boy, should not have felt that. He should have felt like it was a partnership, that they were coming in to let them know how police are there and what they do, and what their job can, it means, and how do you become a police officer. He said it was none of that. It was a true intimidation tactic. At least that's what him and his friends felt. That's a problem. That's a problem. That's a problem. So I'm going to take that feedback and give it to the prosecutor and say, we cannot have this.
Right.
And that's where, again, I think, like I said, I think it's embedded. When we have those encounters with police officers, and we know some put on that uniform and they become Superman. When they become Superman, it's different when they're not in uniform. And that's, my son said, that's what he felt. He felt like he wanted to say to them, if you weren't in that uniform, we would F y'all up. At 15 years old, that's what he wanted to say when they came into the school. That's a problem.
Yeah.
He should not feel that way about law enforcement at such a young age.
Right.
He shouldn't feel that way about law enforcement. And it's been hard to get him to see law enforcement differently. He had an uncle who was a cop for like 20 years. He said I'll deal with him when he's my uncle, but not when he's in that uniform. That's terrible.
Yeah.
That's terrible. So I think, to answer your question, and I know I gave you a long answer, I would like to continue the conversations with the prosecutor's office. I would like to share these experiences, and then we need to have the prosecutor's office in these type of forums.
I agree. Yeah.
I
have one more question. Do I have time?
Well, I know Sarah would like to ask a question too.
Okay. I just want to talk about voter suppression.
Yeah.
How do you see, is that a large problem in Burlington County?
I have not seen that as a problem in Burlington County, but now that we are experiencing what we're experiencing, it may become one. It may become one. So we have our challenges, right? Because we know we're doing vote by mail for our primary July 7th. So I don't think it'll be a big problem. But when we get to the general election, I think we might have to pay a little bit more attention.
Okay.
Felicia, I do want to talk to you about ongoing issues in Medford with their voting booths and things. So we're going to have a conversation about that, because certain districts seem to always show up late and the machines aren't working, just certain districts. So
Yeah.
All right, is it okay if I move on to Sarah?
I'm finished.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Muted. Sarah's next.
So I just wanted to thank Felicia for taking the time to come and speak to us about some of the issues in the county. As a mother who's raised a Black son, I can tell you that sometimes it's very trying, because I think I've shared with a lot of you that it's heartbreaking when you have to have that conversation, or that talk, as we call it, with our boys, because, and I posted something on my Facebook page. There's a long list of do's and don'ts that we have to tell our children, our boys, before they leave home. And one of the things that Felicia says, don't wear a hoodie, okay? Don't wear the do-rag. Stop by a police officer, put your hands on the dashboard. Don't make any sudden moves, all of that. And that's usually at a very early age. We have to do that. Now, the first step, I think, in improving racial relations is that none of us, Black or white, should get offended when it comes time to talk about racial issues.
I agree.
I worked for 40 years almost in a predominantly Republican school district, but I will say that I met some very good co-workers now who have become my friends, who, whenever there was a racial question or anything to do with race, they felt, they could open up and they could come and ask. And we had, I think, what was a conversation. They were able to ask their questions freely, and I was able to answer the question freely without it being a problem when it came to race. The number one step to resolving all of the issues with race is a willingness to be able to talk to someone of an opposite culture, different race than you, about what's going on. Because if there's not that willingness to discuss racial issues, we're never going to improve the situation.
Right.
So, and that's all I had to say. Just that one is being able to talk about racial things.
I agree.
Without feeling as though you're offending each other.
Right.
Ask the question.
Yeah.
I agree. And I can even take it a step further from that. And I gave the example during our meeting today, during the Freeholder meeting. So exactly 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting. And that Monday before our meeting, because we meet on Wednesdays, we lost George Floyd that Monday. So Monday he passes away at Wednesday we have a meeting, and we had a lot of people call in about an issue up in northern Burlington County, and no one ever brought up the loss of his life or racial inequality. So today, when the caller called in and said that she was appalled that we didn't have any type of resolution on our agenda about Black Lives Matter, you know, my response was really, really simple. You know, you guys call in and you talk about these things that are affecting your town directly, and you say it with such venom and disgust and disrespect towards the Freeholder Board. And I don't take anything personally, because you can't as a politician, but that's what I hear when they're speaking. So, you know, but no one had that same level of disgust and venom when we lost when this man was murdered in front of America.
Yeah.
No one had that in their voice when they called in today. So I challenge people to really focus on what's really important to you.
And then,
because if Black Lives matter to you, then why aren't you using your voice? That was my point. If Black Lives matter to you, as you say they do,
yes,
then it should not just be Black people speaking up. And no, I see all of the protests, and it's white people and it's Asian people, and I get that, but I'm talking about from our local towns. You know, they want to come and they want to attack the local officials on you know, speed bumps and potholes, you know, and they speak with such venom, whether or not, you know, you're going to get this resolution passed and that resolution passed. But when we're talking about human life, when we're talking about homelessness, we don't have that same level of contentment in our voices. And that bothers me, but that's a personal problem that I can't speak to from the dais.
right.
But I find it very interesting and very contradictory of those who call in and want to complain about certain things. But then in the next breath, you care about Black Lives Matter, but how are you proving that?
Yeah.
and then another thing I just want to say, the second thing is for my white counterparts out there, when you're on your most of the time when we, all of us, come in contact with someone of a different race, it's usually through our job or like in an organization like this. So one of the things that we used to do at my school, we, you know, look around and we would always ask, well, I always ask, well, how come we don't have that many Black people here? And you all know where I worked. I worked in Hamilton Township, predominantly Italian, white, and Republican. Well, what's the number? How come we don't have more Blacks? Because our population in Hamilton was about, I worked on the side of Hamilton where there were more Blacks and Hispanic kids, because they were moving in from Trenton. But the teaching population did not reflect the student population in the very beginning. And then there was a group who, of course, was talking about how come there's not more representation. So the numbers improved. But in situations like that, the conversation has to come from our white counterparts, or otherwise things are never going to change, because all you're going to be is, there's that Black girl, she's a lady, she's always complaining about something. But the second step, I think, to improving is to look around you. If you're working in an office where there's only, say there's like 20 of you and there's only 1 or 2 Blacks, you can't close your mind and say that, oh, well, the reason why there are no Blacks there is because they're not qualified. Sure, they're qualified, but there's a reason why they're not there. And I think it would behoove everybody, Blacks and whites, to question why.
Well, I just read an article in Philadelphia Magazine. I don't know if anybody saw it, but the author was Black, and he was saying, you know, people were calling him and asking him advice after everything that happened, and he said, I'm kind of tired of giving this advice. He said, but what you need to do is make room.
Yeah.
You need to have more board members that are Black. You need to hire more Black people. You need to make room for us, or it's not going to make any difference.
Right. And I know Nancy and I've had some conversations about racial things. Marianne and I've had conversations about racial things. You have to be able to feel comfortable enough to talk to someone of a different race, because that conversation is going to be what's going to open up avenues. And if you're so closed off that you can't have the conversations with people, then nothing is ever going to change.
Right. Does anyone else have any questions or comments that anything they want to talk about? Anybody? We're good? Felicia, I can't. Is someone?
Marianne.
Oh, Marianne, I'm sorry. I almost missed you. I can't unmute you. Do you have yourself?
Okay.
There we go. Try and unmute.
Maybe she has herself muted.
Okay.
You have there you go.
Okay,
Okay.
working?
Yep.
Let me say, one of the greatest things that I saw was when, and I remember it was almost overwhelming, when Obama got elected that night, when you looked at that crowd and you saw the power of the people. No matter from the Democrat, it was like the power of the people to elect him. That was democracy at its best I've ever seen it. And it was like wonderful. It was wonderful to be in this country at that moment in time. And I think that for the guys I work with, the people that I know, and I say, make sure you register your kids, make sure you get them out there, because you have that power, you have that vote, and you can make that difference. So if there's somebody you know who is a good representative for you, they should be in office. And my older son, Chris, is, he works at the city high school in Burlington, but he is part-time with the police there. And he knows the kids in the school, and it's like it's a good mix. And he actually had said he's trained a couple of the kids that were his students. And it's nice because they're on the force. And he was telling that to Barry Conaway, like how it's good because the leadership represents a lot, what your community is and how your leaders feel about that community. And they make a big difference so that's why it's good to have you on the Freeholder board and to see.
Thank you.
That will make such a difference for so many people in this county. And just what you're sharing now, how instructive that is for all of us, to be able to share your son with us. I think that, and like Sarah said, to have some of that dialogue, that goes so far, because your point of how some of this stuff is so ingrained in people, it's bothersome. When I see it, it's bothersome. And you just hope that the young people that are coming into this world will change their mind. And sometimes I see that, and they do, and it's like they dispel what their parents' point of view. And it's like so heartening to see that that's the case. And I think this moment in time, for George Floyd and what has happened here, it was horrible for all of us to have to watch that. And I thought, I can't imagine if I was watching my son on that ground. I would.
Right.
His family had to feel, that it was there. And Chris mentioned to me they went to school in West Virginia. And he and my daughter and one of the girls from here, all white students, were driving across Maryland. And a white officer stopped them. And Chris said he just didn't know what that officer was going to do next. And they were so fearful, and he was so aggressive and so overbearing. And Chris said to me, I think back on that a lot. Like when you see these kids, and it's these kids of color, that's how they feel when that police officer stops them. And I felt for them, thank God they got away,
Yeah, it's a scary feeling.
Yeah.
It's a scary feeling, and it's scary for some Black women as well. I mean, it's just not Black boys and, young.
As a mom, sure.
It's scary
for girls.
For Black women, white women are treated differently than we are in the workplace, in the grocery stores.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on and on and on. White women are privileged enough to know that if it's a Black woman and a white woman up for the same position in corporate America, chances are chances are the position will go to the white woman.
Yep.
Because she is white, not because she's more qualified, just because she is white. I've had this conversation with my college roommates for years, and we all still talk about it because as Black women, we know that, well, now it's changed, but when I first got out of college, most HR representatives for most companies were white. So you were not getting called back for interviews because of your name, or once you got there, they didn't like you because you were Black, and you were not going to be able to make it to the next step. So we dealt with that. Oh gosh, if I dealt with it when I was in college, just coming out of college in the early 90s, I could just imagine what people like Ida and Mrs. Holly and Ann Whitman went through in their careers.
Right.
So we still have the conversation to this day. And I had a white colleague reach out to me just yesterday talking about how she still sees it in corporate America with white HR representation. It's not as bad as it was in the 90s or late 90s when Black people would give their kids these outlandish names. And we were saying for years, it's going to be so hard for them to get a job because we knew HR departments were all white.
Yeah.
And that's something that white people don't think about.
No.
Right.
And
Right.
White people don't think about it, but we think about it all. And I tell you, I had the conversation with my son's father when we were picking out a name for him. You know, I had to make sure it was a simple enough name that could be spelled and pronounced, period.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I could not come up with anything outlandish.
Right. But that's a thought. Yeah. What a thought process.
I would have hurt his future because
Yeah.
most corporations are run by white people. And I didn't know, now he's a plumber now. So, he's writing his own ticket, but I didn't know that he was going to be a plumber.
Right.
But that's something that Black people talk about. And that's the stuff that we have at our dinner table. These are the conversations that we have at our dinner table. And it's unfortunate that we have to have it. And Nancy, you recall, I said it on Sunday, as a Black woman, I have to have my elevator speech ready. At the drop of a dime, I have to have my elevator. Why do I have to prove to you that I have a master's degree?
Right.
Why do I have to prove to you that I'm working on my doctorate degree? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right.
And Nicole, you could relate to this because as a white woman who has her doctorate degree, you don't have to say anything more.
Right.
They just introduce you as Dr. Nicole, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But as a Black woman, but
After they go through Miss and Mrs., sometimes they get to doctor. So
right, but there's a huge disparity between the two. White woman with a doctorate degree, a Black woman with a doctorate degree. That Black woman is doing a lot more talking about how she got there, what did she do, what did she study, because she's being questioned more.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, she probably works just as hard, if not harder, than her counterpart, but that Black woman is being questioned 10 times more. And that's what I go through. That's what I went through on the campaign trail. Yeah. I can't tell you how many people asked about my resume. I thought blew my mind. It blew my mind. They didn't ask me about my community service, what I thought about raising taxes, what I thought about the county schools. They didn't ask me about county issues. They asked about my resume.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to make sure I was qualified enough. And then come to find out, half of the elected officials don't even have college degrees.
Right.
I
what the fuck? Right? I did. And I'm sorry for my language.
No, that's okay.
I thought to myself, I had my master's. I'm almost done my doctorate. So it blew my mind.
Yeah.
It blew my mind. But it just goes to show you the conversation that we as Black women continue to have. Mm-hmm. And our conversations won't stop because this is a part. I have a group chat with a bunch of my sorority sisters, and I have a group chat with my college roommates. And at least once a week, one of us has a story about how they didn't get something, but their white counterpart asked for it, and the white counterpart got it. That's once a week, and we're in 2020.
That's amazing. But I think having you as the freeholder for so many of the girls behind you, it's like that's such a good. It's like they can aspire to all that. They can say she can do it, I can do it.
I hope so. I hope so. It's hard. It's hard because it's a thankless job. It's a thankless job. And Nicole knows. Nicole said, it's a thankless job. So, you know, when it's hard to get people to want to come and serve because, like I said, we get attacked. And I know, Nicole, and I'm sure you get it too. But we have those people who call in and they have such a venom in their voices for us. And you think to yourself, I don't even know you outside of this day. It's like, why are you so angry? And why are you willing to be so disrespectful towards me? And then so, you know, I don't know. I would like to get more Black and brown girls involved in politics, but I've got to first make sure they have this, the skin for it.
They can take it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's such, and I don't go on social media that much. I'm a lot older than most of the other girls who may get involved, but you have to have a very thick skin and you have to be ready to defend yourself in a way that won't offend the person you have to defend yourself to.
Who's offended you?
And I thought that blew my mind too.
Yeah.
I've got to be nice to you. You offended me. I got to be nice to you because of what might be in the paper or what somebody might say on a social media group. But now I got to figure out a nice way to defend myself, but you're insulting me.
Right.
So those are some of the things that I just constantly had to deal with, and still I don't deal with it as much, but I can, like I said, and listen, Ann, tell me what you think. Can you tell how quickly can you tell a racist? Can you look at a white racist and know that they're racist?
Who's that?
Ann.
Let me unmute her.
Ann Whitman.
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute her.
Yeah, I want to know what she thinks because it speaks volumes.
She's got herself.
When you guys, because I wish.
There she is.
Yeah, can you hear us?
I just have to,
Do you hear my question?
Yes.
Again?
Your question was, can I see a racist? Can I identify them?
Right. Yeah. Can you look at a white person and tell if they're racist or not?
I can't just look, but I can observe behaviors and engage in conversation or hear them talking. And we do pick up on things. You know, we've lived for all these years in this Black skin.
Sure.
So, you know, you're at a point you go through everything that you do on a daily basis. If it's going to the mall or going, like you said, to the grocery store, wherever you have interactions, you could be standing at a counter. You're next in line. Someone of a different race comes up after you, and the cashier looks up and they call on the other person.
Yeah, all the time. Yep.
Those are the kinds of things that we experience. But I did want to say, since you asked me that question, I want to just stress, I know one of you mentioned President Obama and you know, his election and how great that was for the country. And I just want to say, you, Felicia, in your position, President Obama, and all of our people of color that are in positions of power or leadership, I just think that is so important for our children to see. I moved to Burlington County in 1980.
Oh, wow.
And I got my first job was at, well, that wasn't my first job, but I got a job at Country Club Elementary School in Willingboro. Now, I have to say that I moved here from the South. I'm assuming everybody knows about the South. I don't have to go into detail about that. So I thought I was coming up here to the North.
Right.
Everything was progressive.
Right.
Lo and behold, I was the only Black teacher at Country Club Elementary School
in 1980.
In 1980.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
In 1980, and Sarah can, you know, verify this, was predominantly Black. The population was predominantly Black.
Yeah.
But and the students in that school, of course, the population was predominantly Black, but they had no Black teachers.
Right.
So the following year, I found out that, you know, the parents had been up in arms, and of course that's what they wanted. So the following year, they transferred 2 other Black teachers over to that building. But fast forward a few years later, I get a position in Hamilton Township, and you guys heard Sarah talk about that district too, Italian, Republican, what have you. For 20 years, I am the only Black teacher in that building. Not only that, because of the neighborhood, in 20 years, maybe 5 minority students came through that building.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've been on the other side. I know that, and I know what culture shock is because I experienced it. I lived it. I came from the South where things were fairly integrated and you knew where people stood. And I came up here and I was totally shocked that, you know, things were supposed to be progressive up here, but they were not.
Yeah.
And then there were, you know, there were with my coworkers, there were instances when it was very obvious, and of course I was there by myself. I had no choice. I needed the job, you know. But I did have experiences of you know, racism.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
But I think it's important.
It is. And I agree.
I know it was important for those white students that I taught for 20 years.
Yeah.
To have the experience of interacting with a Black teacher.
Yes.
I was probably the only one that they had until maybe they got to high school.
No, I get it.
When I left Alexander Elementary School in 2004, I retired. That was it. There were no Black teachers then. There were no minority teachers, not just Black, but no minority teachers either.
Yeah.
So, and I know that, you know, I know that they had to have a quota, but I also know that if I wasn't, what's the word? If I wasn't qualified, I would not have been there for 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, I found myself having to work harder than everybody else.
Yeah. And I think, you know, several people have asked me, what do we do next? How do we go on from here? And Sunday when I spoke, I talked a little bit about diversity. I think diversity is great. I don't think diversity is the answer, because if you don't have those diverse people in positions of leadership to have the difficult conversations and make the difficult, or not difficult, but make those demands on changing policies, it won't do us any good. So diversity has to go hand in hand with putting diverse people into leadership so they have the power to make the decisions. And so if I had to say, what do we do next? My first thing I would say is that white people, when you don't see diversity, you should be asking about it, and then you should be making sure that there's diverse people in leadership, not just in the group or in the job, but they have to be in a leadership role so they can make those policy changes so it's fair for all.
Well, then
I think that's pivotal, and I think that is. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then the policy changes.
I'm sorry. What'd you say, Nance?
I think policy changes are important with the leadership. If it's all white leadership and they're just saying, okay, we're going to hire 10 Black people, it's just not. That's not the same thing.
Nope.
So it's hard. It's hard. So, but I think that's where we take the next step. So a lot of people have been asking me, well, what's next? How do we get? Where do we go from here? We need to talk about diversity, but we need to talk about having leadership, diverse leadership, so they can make the decisions that we need to make about the policies, get those policies changed so we can have people coming together and then making, you know, the progression that we need.
Right.
Well, I'm certainly glad that you're in leadership and you keep working.
Thank you, Ann. I appreciate it.
At least you're doing a dynamite job. And your speech brought me to tears over the weekend. I really do that.
Thank you. I was hurt. And it all came out. And I did not mean to use profanity.
You're a mom.
And personally, I do curse, and I shouldn't curse the way I curse, but I do. But I did not mean to use the profanity that I did, but I was hurt, and I felt like if I didn't say it in that moment, it would have been lost.
Right.
So
No, I think you're right.
And I had several conversations. I talked to my college roommates at least once a day. Since this happened, we've been on the phone 2-3 times a day because we didn't know how to transfer our feelings because we have never seen someone murdered. And we didn't realize that was the thump in our throat until days after. And so I have one of my closest friends. She's from South Carolina. She's born and raised there, and you know, Confederate flags on every other highway when you travel. I went to school in South Carolina, so she said the same thing, that we've experienced racism when we were there in college, but we didn't experience it to the magnitude of what we're seeing today. Like how we lost Trayvon, how we lost Arbery. Like we didn't see the magnitude of racism, and we were in school in the South.
Yeah.
So for it to be happening now, and we're much older, you know, advanced adults with children, it blew our minds. So we had to really spend time on the phone counseling each other as to what do we say, how do we feel, what do we tell our kids. It was a very difficult conversation for us. And I actually learned a lot from my son because of how he processed it. And when we found out those young white girls were on Twitter and they were doing the reenactment of George Floyd, there was I don't know if you guys heard about it, but there was like I don't know how many white kids, but they were reenacting how George Floyd passed away, and it was on Twitter.
Oh, no.
So my college roommate sent it to me, and I sent it to my son, and I'm like, oh my God, this is horrible. Did you see it? His response was just as calm as if he was coming in here about to make dinner. He says, Mom, don't worry about it. Black Twitter gonna take care of it. I said, well, how is Black Twitter gonna take care of this? Because this is outrageous. He said, because we're gonna get them reported. 3 of them already lost their scholarships. I said,
there you go.
I wanna, not, you know, something needed to be done. Right? Something needed to be done because something drastic needed to be done. Right. So when he told me that, and I thought about his generation because they have social media, my generation didn't have it. So I was like, oh, that makes sense. He was like, yeah, I heard you on the phone with Aunt Angie and Aunt Nico, but I wanted to tell you, but you guys were all crying. I just went to sleep. I said, I wish you would have told us. But, you know, because his generation has that vehicle of social media and they're using it for the right reasons, I think in some cases we will be okay. But in the bigger cases where I'm still dealing with it and so many other women of color, it's trying to us, because you have to remember the Black woman is the most underrepresented woman. We don't have men speaking up for us like other cultures and white women and Asian women. So we also have that additional challenge on top of being Black, being educated, being single. There's so many layers to this systematic problem of racism.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Felicia, I think we've kept you long enough.
You've done, yeah, thank you.
I sincerely appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Thanks so much for having the conversation, and I hope you guys were able to get something from it.
Yep.
Definitely.
I don't particularly like to hear myself talk, but I appreciate you, Nancy, for reaching out to me. And listen, let's continue to have the conversation. I say we should have this dialogue on a quarterly basis.
That sounds great.
So we can come up with a plan, because if we stop talking about it, nothing will get done.
Correct.
We need to have this dialogue in the next 3 months to see where we land.
That sounds great.
What we're doing, and then maybe we reach out to the prosecutor's office asking for representation to be on these calls. Maybe we make it a true forum.
That would be great.
Yeah, I think that's what we should do.
Could I say something?
Bring some more people in and try to have, broader conversation. Yeah. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Could I add a point?
I
add a point?
Wanda? Yeah.
I'd like to add a point and ask if anyone has read President Obama's toolkit yet, which is very, very long and lengthy. We all want to change the hearts and minds, but we know we're not going to instantaneously change the hearts and minds. And logistically, we want to go forward as community influencers, legislators, all with specific points. And President Obama has issued an excellent document of specific things that all of us could be looking at and seeing what might be, pick and choose what we implement in our areas. There are other things that are coming out, as I was trying to reference before. And in the next 3 months, I'm wondering if we could maybe get some of these things into the hands of everybody here in Burlington County and start to look at what can we actually do? How can we begin to actually effectuate some of these details in particular? And again, back to Felicia, you know, my heart hurts for you, Felicia, because yeah, you're just coming to a lot of this. I grew up through it. I grew up and also angry in the recent years, recognizing how much our own history had become a secret to us. I'm unique, I found out. I was shocked to find out because I grew up with all this ugliness. I grew up with the photographs that came through from my family members and the work that they'd done. I grew up with the details. I grew up with the knowledge. I grew up with the firsthand stories. I grew up. So in some ways, as traumatized as I am, I know that I had at least more of a seatbelt on than you've had on by virtue of this intentionally being done. And so that's more of how I'm happy that your son and his group are actually getting some of the history that skipped over a generation or two. They're getting it through Facebook and Twitter and other. They're seeing this, cruel as it is, and yet they need to have this knowledge. They need to have the history, in addition to us needing to work on the details. So back to Obama's, has anybody seen it?
I have not. I'll go look for it.
I can email it again on the thread to people. And again, things that are specifically are trying to already work. There's no sense in us trying to reinvent the wheel if we have tools to already be utilizing.
Completely agree.
Thank you, Wanda. I appreciate it. Does anyone else have anything before we let Felicia have the rest of the evening to herself? Nicole?
Thanks, Felicia.
Thanks, Felicia.
Thank you.
Thank you, lady.
Wait, what, Mrs. Holly, did you have something?
No, I was just wanted to say one thing because you were talking about Twitter. Just wanted to talk about the incident that was in Franklinville, New Jersey. That correction officer and the man that worked for FedEx, the FedEx man was fired right away, and then the other gentleman is suspended from his job. He was a correction officer. Can you imagine?
Well, I'm glad that everybody froze.
But that's all I want to say.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit, and you're right. And that's why I said those are the people that it's embedded in. So when you guys are going out and having these conversations with your white counterparts, you almost need to do some type of psychoanalytic process with them before you have a conversation, because if they're not open to receiving this conversation about race, you know, your words will fall on deaf ears. So you make sure you do a true assessment with your friends. And listen, some of my Black friends, I can't have a conversation with about race because they're so militant and still so angry. So I choose not to have the conversation with them. But we need to make sure we're having a.
But not only that, and no disrespect, but not all Black folks get it. To be honest with you, we have a lot of Blacks like Ben Carson, whose head is stuck in the sand. They don't really get it. They don't get it.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I didn't want to bring up Ben Carson, but
I mean, and there are a lot of Blacks like him. They don't get it. They keep their head in the sand.
Yeah, they do. They do. Yeah. But thank you guys so much for this. And Nancy, let's do it again in 3 months, and let's try to continue the conversation. We've got to do something. Yeah. And I think the conversation needs to continue. So I say let's start with that.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you.
Bye.
Thank you, Felicia.
Bye.
You're welcome. Nicole, we'll talk soon. We'll catch up soon.
Yes, please.
All righty. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.